Once, a long time ago, I had a brother. He was going to be king. But he was never crowned. One night they came for us. We disappeared. And though our bodies were never found, the people believe we are dead.
So little is known of the fate of those two souls. But this much we do know. For only 77 days, England was ruled by a 12-year-old Prince of York. Edward and his brother Richard were imprisoned in the Tower of London. They were seen playing outside together on a summer's day in 1483. And then they were never seen again. Unless you believe the story of a man who appeared 8 years later.
My name is Richard, Duke of York. I am back to claim my throne. Le roi est vif.
He was royally received all over Europe. Ireland gave him men. Scotland gave him their king's cousin as his bride. He landed on the shores of England with an army of 8,000. His supporters proclaimed him King Richard IV. He was ready to face his foe. The House of Lancaster now ruled England. Henry Tudor had beaten the Yorkists in battle to take the crown. Now he would finish them off once and for all. He sent his army west to crush the uprising and hang its leaders. But Richard, he wanted taken alive. He was dragged back to the very place where the princes had been held. The new Tudor king, Henry VII, was a superstitious man, known to consult an astrologer before making any kind of decision.
Stop in God's name!
The young man had too many friends among the ambassadors of Europe to simply disappear. The identity of this man imprisoned in the Tower remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries in the story of England's past. Could there be any chance that he was one of those little boys delivered from death? One thing was now certain. To silence the pretender forever, Henry would need to extract a confession. Richard had lost on the battlefield. But was this the real contest?
Please be seated.
One slip, and it will all be over.
This is the Bishop of Cambrai, ambassador for the Duchess of Burgundy. Whatever is said and done in this room will be properly recorded. I don't believe your claim to be a prince. It's quite clear the princes were murdered by their uncle Richard here in the Tower. I don't believe you've ever been in the Tower in your life. But we live in a country which respects the law.
The law, you say? Things must have changed then.
What is your name?
Richard.
Richard.
Yes?
You're sure about that? Think carefully before you answer.
Well, to speak more truthfully, and we must speak the truth, for there are witnesses and a scribe present, I would have to call myself Richard Plantagenet, the Fourth, of England, Duke of York, Earl Marshal of England, Duke of Norfolk, Earl of Varennes and of Nottingham, Lord of Seagrave, Mowbray, and Gower. Do you need me to repeat any of that?
Since when have you been referring to yourself by those titles?
Since my first marriage, to Anne, Duchess of Mowbray. Alas, no dead.
When did she die?
Can't remember.
You can't remember when your wife died?
About 1482, I think. I didn't pay much attention. Well, I was only 9 at the time.
Are these your clothes?
Yes.
They say they cost a king's ransom.
Well, the clothes make the man.
Only a king has the right to wear cloth of gold.
I know.
But wearing cloth of gold does not bestow kingship.
I should hope not. They say they see in my face the image of the last rightful King of England. My father, Edward IV.
A person might use a portrait as a model.
He might. And then again, he might not. I grant you a person might cut his hair this way or that to suggest a resemblance, but the features of the face, they are God-given.
Quel philosophe?
J'ai lu la philosophie. Pas assez.
Is French your native tongue?
No.
Your accent is perfect.
Thank you.
As if it were your native tongue.
Anyone who travels and who has a good ear can become as skilled as I am with little trouble.
This is all show and no substance. It is time to eat.
Of all the forces that guided the king, the most powerful was his mother. It was because of her Lancastrian blood that he was born 6th in line to the throne. Lady Margaret Beaufort, pious and pitiless.
Why is Cambrai here now?
A courtesy visit, or so he says. The Spanish ambassador arrives this afternoon.
Ambassadors always arrive at the worst possible time. It's part of their skill. Well, Spain surely won't give us Catherine of Aragon for our grandson if they get any suspicion we're not secure on the throne.
Will you send for the king?
No. If Henry comes, it will give Europe the message that he thinks the Pretender is a serious threat. I'll come myself.
A Tudor marriage with Spain had for years been Lady Margaret's passionate desire. Once consummated, it would place her family on Europe's high table, keeping company with the world's elite. But the Pretender had built his own European alliances, which threatened the fulfillment of her dream. Lady Margaret knew she needed to bring the interrogation to an end, swiftly and decisively. This task she had entrusted to a man thought by many to possess the most cunning mind in England.
You're not Richard. You're not a duke. You're not of the House of York. You're not even English. You're a puppet and a pawn, and you will pay the price for what you have done.
Do you think I'm afraid of you? Ask me your questions, trick me if you can. But remember this. I am Richard, Duke of York, the last rightful heir of Edward IV, and I am your king. And I say before these witnesses that when this is over, you will kneel to Richard IV and beg for mercy.
1483, King Edward dies. What happens to Richard? Answer the question.
On April the 9th, I went with my mother to take sanctuary at Westminster Abbey.
And your brother went with you?
No, my uncle had taken him to the Tower to prepare for his coronation.
When did you join him?
For a few weeks, I stayed quietly with my mother and sisters. We weren't allowed out. Then one day, my Uncle Richard came for me. He embraced me, gave me warm words, and said he'd keep me safe. Then I was taken by boat to the Tower.
So, your life in the Tower?
We had a few familiar attendants, men we'd known at our father's court. We played in the grounds.
You were able to play out of doors?
For a time.
So here you are, having a little holiday, not feeling very frightened, or?
One day when we weren't looking, they took our attendants away. We were playing. One minute they were there watching over us, next minute they'd gone.
And then?
They moved us. They put us somewhere further inside the tower. We weren't allowed outside anymore, and we were kept locked up at all times.
Your brother was inclined to be melancholy, was he not?
He was in severe pain. He had a disease in his jaw. From the moment they took our attendants away, he was convinced we were going to die.
Did anyone come to see you?
There was a doctor. He'd been in our father's court. He came to see Edward.
What was his name?
It was something to do with silver. He was an astrologer, an alchemist too, one of my father's closest advisors.
What was he like?
He was a kind man. He seemed the last bit of safety, the last link with the world we'd known. When he stopped coming, even I got scared.
So tell us about your escape. Tell us by what miracle Prince Richard honors us with his presence, when most of those who knew him thought him dead these 16 years.
We went to bed. We slept. I remember half waking up and seeing two men standing beside my brother's bed. I was used to seeing guards in the room, so I didn't pay any attention.
Guards in the room at night?
Yes, they'd check on us several times, most nights. Anyway, I often had vivid dreams, especially since I'd been in the tower. I thought I must be dreaming. When I woke up, I was in a boat.
In a boat?
Yes.
Did you ask what had happened to your brother?
Of course I did. They told me that he was dead. That I must forget who I was.
So, you slept through the murder of your own brother?
Yes, it seems I did.
When had the doctor stopped coming?
I don't remember exactly. A week, 2 weeks. Argentine. I remember his name now. John Argentine.
Your father's close advisor.
Yes.
And the man who made you feel safe when you were most in danger.
Yes.
How strange that you don't recognize me.
You.
Yes.
I don't believe it.
You didn't know me.
You didn't know me either.
That's because you're an imposter. You didn't recognize me because you've never set eyes on me in your entire miserable life.
No. It's because when you left us, we thought that you were dead. What else were we supposed to think? You were our magician. We thought you were capable of anything.
How dare you? I loved those children as if they were my own.
Then how is it you are here? Not dead at all, but living a life of privilege in the court of a usurper. Did you abandon us for that?
Dr. Argentine knew that the prisoner had won the advantage by creating just sufficient reasonable doubt. Lady Margaret was in no mood for doubt. She called another witness. Not just someone who knew the princes, someone closer in blood to the princes than anyone left alive. The Queen of England. The Spanish ambassador had arrived, and it was true indeed that his timing could not have been worse. He was at court to negotiate a royal marriage, but there was now a very real danger that he would be distracted. The ambassador for Burgundy would surely have told him that the interrogation had not gone well for the Tudors. These two highly influential diplomats were the jury, and their verdict could decide the fate of the Tudor dynasty. There was no one better qualified to test the prisoner's claim than this crucial witness. Elizabeth of York was clearly unhappy to come into the presence of a man who violated the memory of her own long-lost brother.
Her Majesty the Queen and sister to the
I
princess.
know who she is.
Her Majesty will know when you are telling the truth and when you are not. So, begin. What is your earliest memory of your sister?
Allow me to introduce myself. Dr. Rodrigo Gonzalez de Puebla. I feel sure that my colleague, the Bishop of Cambrai, will continue to inform me of events to date. However, I do wish to stress that this imposture is not the matter that I'm here to discuss. So the sooner that it is concluded, the better. For all of us. Negociar con los ingleses siempre me da 100 patadas. Y huele mal a zorros, mi alcoba.
What do you remember of normal family life?
Normal? There was no normal. Up in our schoolroom, our mother is telling us stories of how she's descended from Melusine, the serpent woman. Of course, we had to pretend we didn't think she was completely mad. Meanwhile, across the corridor in his bedroom, the king is throwing a private party. Might be one or more of his 3 regular mistresses and any number of passing fancies of either sex. He'd try anything at least once. He had an adventurous palate and a huge appetite. If it was alive, he'd fuck it. And if it was dead, he'd eat it.
How can you claim to be who you say you are, yet show such disrespect to the Queen by speaking so insultingly of her family?
I show no disrespect, and I mean none. I'm simply telling the truth. By telling the truth, I prove who I am. He kept a feather by his bedside and on the table at all times. He'd stuff himself until he could eat no more, and then use it to make himself sick. Then he'd stuff himself again.
Make him sound like a monster. Grotesque, repellent.
No, he wasn't. At least, whatever he was, it didn't seem to put anyone off. Everyone loved him. The effect he'd had just walking into a room, you'd see it. He could seduce anyone, and they all came back for more. Do you remember that last family Christmas? You in your French clothes. Our father in the best of moods because you were beautiful. Half of the alliance he'd worked for so long. The Queen of France in waiting. It was the nearest we'd got to a happy family Christmas. In my lifetime, anyway. But then a messenger came from Louis to say that the marriage was off. I could see how much you were hurt. Everyone else was running around worrying about the effect on the king. You must have felt it was somehow your fault.
My little brother crossed the room and took my hand. He was the only one. For everyone else, it was though I suddenly did not exist. The Queen behaved as though she was angry with me, but wouldn't say. The King couldn't even look at me. Richard was the only one.
Your Majesty?
I will return. No one knew. And all these years, I have had to imagine, to wonder whether they knew anything that was happening at all.
I've already said much of what I can remember.
No, perhaps you can remember something more specific.
Yes, I'm sure I can. Edward was king, though uncrowned. Since being in the Tower, he'd already been working as the king, signing charters and letters. The date had been set for the coronation. Edward had been measured for his robes, and I had my own special robes for the day.
So did I. We all did. Everything had been prepared.
We did wonder at the time why no one from the family except Uncle Richard had come to see us.
I tried. He wouldn't allow it. Whenever I asked, he just kept saying soon.
That's what he said whenever I asked. But there were the robes. That meant we would see you all again, Edward would be crowned, and we would leave the Tower. The day of the coronation dawned. We got dressed. We waited. And no one came. I remember the sun moving around the room. Edward sitting there, all dressed up, ready to be crowned king. And he never said a word. Didn't have to. We both knew what it meant. No one came. Which meant that one day, someone would come for us. But not to take us to a coronation.
You don't need to have been there to be able to tell us this. Anyone with a vivid imagination...
My Richard had a birthmark on his back. no one knew. And all these years, I have had to imagine, to wonder whether they knew anything that was happening at all.
I've already said much of what I can remember.
Well, perhaps you can remember something more specific.
Yes, I'm sure I can. Edward was king, though uncrowned. Since being in the Tower, he'd already been working as the king, signing charters and letters. The date had been set for the coronation. Edward had been measured for his robes, and I had my own special robes for the day.
So did I. We all did. Everything had been prepared.
We did wonder at the time why no one from the family except Uncle Richard had come to see us.
I tried. He wouldn't allow it. Whenever I asked, he just kept saying soon.
That's what he said whenever I asked. But there were the robes. That meant we would see you all again, Edward would be crowned, and we would leave the Tower. The day of the coronation dawned. We got dressed. We waited. And no one came. I remember the sun moving around the room. Edward sitting there, all dressed up, ready to be crowned king. And he never said a word. Didn't have to. We both knew what it meant. No one came. Which meant that one day, someone would come for us. But not to take us to a coronation.
You don't need to have been there to be able to tell us this. Anyone with a vivid imagination...
My Richard had a birthmark on his back.
You used to sing me to sleep. Do you remember? Lale, lale, my little child. Sleep, and now be still.
If thou be
A little child,
yet
yet may thou have thy will. She is my sister. She has known me since the day I was born. She bathed me, sang to me. If she remembers a mark on my body, it's because she saw that mark when I was 10 years old or less. And if that does not content you, then I ask you, how would any one of you prove you are who you say you are?
The Queen of England herself, far from discrediting the prisoner's claim to the throne of England, had recognized him publicly as her brother, and therefore one of the princes in the Tower. Lady Margaret's plan was spiraling out of control.
I have sent for the king.
He certainly knows everyone's weak spot. This pretender. You've trained him well.
I haven't trained him at all.
But he spent a long time with you and the Duchess, didn't he?
He did, yes.
Well, who do you think he is?
The nature of identity is not at all a simple matter. Who do you think he is?
Perhaps Master Thomas More knows.
Who's Master Thomas More?
Him.
The Queen of England herself, far from discrediting the prisoner's claim to the throne of England, had recognized him publicly as her brother, and therefore one of the princes in the Tower. Lady Margaret's plan was spiraling out of control.
I have sent for the king.
He certainly knows everyone's weak spot. This pretender. You've trained him well.
I haven't trained him at all.
But he spent a long time with you and the Duchess, didn't he?
He did, yes.
Well, who do you think he is?
The nature of identity is not at all a simple matter. Who do you think he is?
Perhaps Master Thomas More knows.
Who's Master Thomas More?
Him. El mudo. El ratón al rincón.
The little mouse in the corner, huh?
Yes. One of Henry's spies, don't you think?
Yes, Henry is the most suspicious monarch in Europe. He has spies everywhere. But I rather think his spies are perhaps a little less obvious.
What is the pretender's age?
26 or thereabout.
The prospect of a match between this man of 26 and our 11-year-old virgin princess grows more desirable.
It grows more interesting hourly. And such an age difference is not uncommon even here in England.
Vaya, vaya corriendo, mi pequeñito murmurador.
I've heard that Henry is on his way.
So, he must think he's in trouble.
Europe was leaning towards the pretender. But the bishop was right. My Lord King Henry didn't need me to be his spy. It was my duty simply to make a record according to his will. By 1499, His Majesty had been plagued for over 8 years by the pretender. During that long time, he'd not been idle in his own defense. He'd been gathering information from a web of sources across Europe, always looking for anything that might help him to discredit this Yorkist claim. And he knew that the situation had now reached a crisis.
Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
It's all right. It's just water. It must have been such a lonely life. Homeless. Wandering from country to country. I think you must be the loneliest man in the world. Whoever you might be.
No, I'm not lonely. I have the love of a beautiful woman. My wife. I have a wife.
And I have a husband.
What?
If it's alive, you fuck it. If it's dead, you eat it. No one's allowed to talk like that anymore. I swear, sometimes it's as though my family never existed.
What do you mean?
Henry doesn't like me to talk about them. He says we were licentious. Makes me feel as though I ought to be ashamed.
Well, I'd hate to make you feel ashamed.
No. I'm only ashamed that he let me forget who I am. What?
It's what seeing you gives me. I can remember myself.
Richard, they've sent for Henry. You've got to get out now. He won't let you live.
Where do you expect me to go?
For the king, too, there was no going back now. He was haunted by a dark prophecy from Dr. Argentine.
My lord, the alignment of the planets is not favorable. Your life is in great danger all year. The deep divisions within the kingdom have not yet healed.
York and Tudor were about to clash once more in mortal combat.
Your Majesty.
What is it, Dr. Argentine?
If Your Majesty will permit, I think a stool sample.
Of course, come along. So it hasn't been going well.
I hesitate to say, Majesty.
Say you must.
It isn't straightforward. There were unexpected developments.
We have to deal with him once and for all, John.
I know.
I have some new information.
The new information was a trail of gunpowder. Henry had every hope it would blow the pretender's claim wide open. But the king was intent on keeping the powder dry until the portents were exactly right.
Diablo con estas pulgas. Cambrai.
Your Excellency.
Mierda. Cambrai. It seems that His Majesty's stools dictate that the most auspicious time to begin his interview is just before midnight. Meantime, I must find some balm for my flea bites.
The royal princes, Arthur and Henry, were nursed and guarded day and night. They were the future of the dynasty, and, as threatened by the pretender, as the king himself.
I hear you had a restless night last night.
No. I would say it had been many years since I slept as soundly.
I'm surprised at you, Elizabeth. I thought I could count on your loyalty. I thought your son could count on his mother.
I surprised myself. Not for what I said or did yesterday, but for how long it has taken me.
Elizabeth. You are the Queen of England.
Yes, Henry. I am Queen.
How has this ridiculous pretender so affected you?
I married a pretender. Our alliance is based on pretense. How can you wonder that another pretender should hold some interest for me?
So, you have some interest.
He reminds me of my father.
Your Majesty?
Time to go, Henry.
It's an extraordinary and affecting story that you tell. The miracle of survival for one of those innocent children. What news that would be for every man, woman, and child in this country, tormented for 16 long years by the memory of what befell the princes in the tower. And you've told this story very convincingly. Most of the crowned heads of Europe seem to believe you. I congratulate you. I would like to tell a different story. You must forgive me if I lack your skill at embroidery. Picture the moment when little Prince Richard was taken from his mother. A man came, took him by the hand, and led him away. Now imagine another scene. A family home in the town of Tournai in Flanders. Een huis in de stad van Doornik in Vlaanderen. A little boy with his mother. A man comes, talks to the mother, takes the boy by the hand, and leads him away. The little boy from Tournai was called Perkin Warbeck. We have a portrait of his mother.
She's a pretty woman.
I'm sure every mother would wish her son to say that of her, especially when she hasn't seen him for many years, and when he only writes to ask her for money. We have here a letter intercepted on its way from England to Flanders. Mother, as humbly as I can, I commend myself to you. And may it please you to know that by fortune, as part of their scheming, certain Englishmen made me take it upon myself that I was the son of King Edward of England. I now find myself in such trouble that if you are not at this hour a good mother to me, I shall be in great danger. And so on, and so on.
I don't know who wrote that, but it wasn't me.
We wanted to bring your mother over here. Indeed, she was on her way, eager, no doubt, to see her son so long away from home. But alas, she died on the way.
That is unfortunate.
Certain citizens of Tournai, who knew the boy well, swear that Perkin had a birthmark on his back. The mark that has convinced your supporters that you are Richard of York.
You have no real proof of anything.
No, since conveniently for you, Perkin's mother died on her way over here.
I'm sorry for her family.
Oh, I'm sure you are. Especially for her husband, the boatman, Johann Warbeck. He told us about the birthmark and how his son disappeared just when you began your famous travels.
Doesn't mean he's my father.
No, not your real father. I heard that the Duchess of Burgundy embraced you not only as her nephew, but as her son.
She adopted me as her son, yes.
Oh, yes, but I heard also that you are indeed her son. Not by adoption, but by birth. And I find myself wondering who the father might be. Some people say that the bishop and the duchess have a secret. Some people say the secret they share is a child who, for the sake of discretion, was called Perkin Warbeck.
This is ridiculous.
Is it? This story gave way to the legend of the risen prince. Only later, when the Duchess decided to use her son in her sad and hopeless game.
This is outrageous. It's calumny. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing.
No, I can believe it. I wouldn't expect anything more from a man who is paid to pander to the neurosis of a usurper.
You call me a usurper? You, a boatman's son, or the bastard child of a bishop?
Yes, and what are you, exactly? You're descended from the illegitimate offspring of the third son of Edward III. A bastard descendant of a bastard. How many were betrayed to clear your path? How can you look at your own children when you think of those two innocents who were murdered, or so you thought, and whose deaths were never avenged? That is why your reign is cursed, and that is why I call you a usurper.
That is enough.
What was Henry thinking of? He was thinking the pretender is looking rather too convincing. Perhaps he was creating a diversion.
I'm glad I have your support.
You do. Of course you do. Your predecessor had 35 illegitimate children. I wouldn't expect you or your Duchess to live up to that.
I shall pretend I didn't hear.
We're not in public now. All I ask is an affirmation or a denial between friends.
My dear friend, I have done nothing to be ashamed of.
The astonishing suggestion that the Duchess of Burgundy and her corpulent confessor were the real parents of the pretender was never substantiated. But one thing now seemed clear. If this was a conspiracy, the Duchess was the one pulling the strings of her puppet prince. And the man who'd been so sure of his story no longer looked so convincing. So the man who would be king of all England was just the son of a common boatman, if the king's spies were to be believed. But boatman's son or not, telling Henry his reign was justly cursed. Now that showed he knew his enemy's weakness.
Don't tell me that you too believe he is the lost prince.
I don't know. But the truth is, he's right. The death of the princes was the murder of innocence. My reign is cursed by it.
You didn't wish for the death of the princes. This is the heart of the night we have lived through for so long. This is when the crucible blackens and all seems dark, all seems lost. The light is only light because the darkness has passed, and it will not pass unless you go through it. Without that, nothing happens, nothing real, nothing enduring. This is your test. He is your test.
Let's just suppose that he is indeed your brother. What would you have me do?
I'd have you do what is right.
And what, in your view, is right?
Find the truth, Henry, and live or die by it.
Where are the children?
Sleep, of course.
What happened to your brothers?
It's not going to happen to them. He would never harm my children.
Our children. Even if you are prepared to sacrifice their right to the throne, you must know that to be a good king, and to keep the peace that I have worked so hard for, he would have to destroy any threat to his security, regardless of who they were. You must choose. Your brother, that's who he is, or your sons. You can't save both.
You don't mention my husband.
And neither have you.
Love was never part of the arrangement between you and I, Henry.
Never part of your arrangement, perhaps, Elizabeth.
First, I want to apologize for any lack of respect we may have shown to the ambassador of Burgundy and Bishop of Cambrai.
And for any lack of respect we may have shown to Dr. Rodrigo González de Puebla. A random likeness, some fancy clothes, good hairdresser. Do you think that's all there is to being a king?
Of course not.
Because if you do, you're a fool, for all your cunning. Though you did manage to deceive the Irish. They followed your fine gold robes.
The Irish were not just following my robes.
They are not the most sophisticated people in the world. And they don't even speak English. They had to read your message in the rain and the stars.
You employ an astrologer yourself. Does that mean you're not sophisticated?
It means I am more sophisticated in my use of astrology.
Then what about my memories? How could I know the things I've told you?
You could have borrowed or invented those.
Borrowed? From whom?
From the Duchess of Burgundy.
She was King Edward's sister.
Which is why it's so significant she recognized me. But even she wouldn't know the secrets that brothers and sisters share with each other.
You remember too well, and too much. It's all too like a lesson you've learned, a performance. And your performance is too perfect. And the whole of Europe is playing the same game with you. Anyone who has ever wanted to be a thorn in my side has used you. They're not your friends, they're my enemies.
James of Scotland is my true friend. He gave me his kinswoman in marriage.
Yes. Lovely Catherine Gordon. And do you think that she would have married you if she'd had any choice? Or if she knew who you really are?
Perhaps you should ask her.
Well, perhaps I will. After I've dealt with you. And that shouldn't take long. There's no reason why I shouldn't hang you here and now. You are a fake. You're a puppet, Perkin Warbeck. You're a nobody from Tournai.
And you're a nobody from Wales, who's only on the throne because you won a battle and married my sister. You never made a decision in your life without asking your mother's permission. If anyone's a puppet, I think you'll find it's you.
My lord! My lord! Go on, Henry, kill me! You can do that if you want to. But it won't be the end of it. I have a son. A son of York.
The people will flock to him when I'm gone.
The consequences of this revelation cannot be exaggerated. If there really was a son, the House of York would not end with the death of this prisoner.
A complete imposter. The son of a boatman. The pawn of a duchess. And yet he's turned the head of a queen. So who is he?
Do you think he knows who he is himself?
I'm not sure. Do you know who you are?
Sometimes I believe I do. But so much of knowing myself, indeed, is from memories.
If the past is a memory, then it partakes of a dream. If it is a dream, then it is just an illusion.
Who said that?
I don't know. I can't remember.
If the past is an illusion, then perhaps we need to go to the place of the pretender's dreams.
Go on.
Enter the world, the physical world, where the murder happened. If it happened. Stones that are still there, physically there, in the present, where it has tangible reality.
We have the pretender take us to the very realms where those little boys...
Yes. See, physical reality has such a power over the minds of men. We can ask the king. Rather, we can tell him. He should give us proper respect. And if we need clarification and certainty, then he must enable us to find it.
That will truly settle the matter, one way or another.
It's just a room. I don't see what difference it will make.
We have seen so much contradictory evidence, it is difficult to know what to believe. Let us observe his behavior in the very room where the murders are supposed to have happened. Then we can make a judgment.
You shouldn't tell him which room it is, or give him the real reason for the move.
If we cannot be reassured that the House of Tudor is secure, then we will take our leave. And I will have to tell my king and queen why I am returning early without having secured a match for their daughter.
It's not just whether we believe him or not. He disturbs the conscience of this country. He's almost become its conscience.
The matter is, as always, entirely in your hands, Your Majesty.
Don't do it, Henry. If you agree, he'll bewitch you. He'll bewitch everyone. You might as well give up now. Tell him, John.
I cannot do that, my lady.
What? What is this?
As the bishop said, it's my conscience. I cannot pretend I don't hear it. I want to know what happened to those little boys.
Henry.
I will take my own counsel. Thank you, Mother.
So this was to be the real test. This would prove, once and for all, if he was a prince or the most brilliant impostor of all time. It was well known that 16 years earlier, the princes had been moved by their Uncle Richard to new quarters somewhere high in the tower. As their protector, he'd been the only one with keys to their rooms. Or so it had been supposed. Certainly their whereabouts had remained a closely guarded secret.
Well, Dr. Argentine, don't keep us in suspense. Was this the room you visited?
Yes.
The door was kept locked. At night, Edward would cry out in agony. From the moment we were shown into this room, he was sure we were going to die. The flesh in his mouth was being eaten away. Women came with food, but they didn't spend much time with us. I don't know who they were, Perhaps Lady Margaret can tell us. You were here at court, weren't you? I heard a rumor you tried to free us.
I heard that rumor, too.
I put my name to a plot to rescue the princes, it's true. But I wasn't in London at the time. Richard found out and I had to stay away.
Did they feed you well?
Often they would give us broth. I hated it. Edward ate it. There wasn't much he could eat that was solid. Perhaps that's why they kept bringing it. But he got weaker. I should have been the weaker one. I was the one who wouldn't eat. I begged them for something else sometimes, but they didn't take any notice.
And he grew weaker, even though he was eating and you were not.
Yes.
But you did say he was very ill already.
No, this was different. He got sick to his stomach.
Could the broth have been poisoned, eh?
Nobody poisoned the princes.
Of course. Only Uncle Richard had access.
We want to know what happened on the night you did not die.
I got into bed. I went to sleep. But not for long. Edward was in so much pain. He kept crying out. I couldn't bear it. And then I heard them come in.
Are you now saying you were awake?
Being here is different to the memory of being here. There were two of them. They went over to Edward's bed. I was so frightened, I pretended to be asleep. I hid my face. I couldn't move. But I could hear. I didn't help him. I didn't help him. Then they came for me. As they picked me up, I was screaming.
What do you see?
Uncle Richard. He was here. Standing in the doorway, he was here. He put his arm around me.
Richard was away. He was touring the country after his coronation. He distanced himself. He went away.
He spared me. My uncle spared me.
Why?
Because, like him, I was the younger brother of a king. Because I bore his name.
He was not a man of sentiment.
Perhaps he didn't have a choice with Edward. My brother was as good as dead. It was an act of mercy to take his life. The real murderer was the one killing him slowly before my eyes. someone else who had access. One of the women. I remember.
We've heard enough. Take him away. Your Excellency. My lady.
John. You were here when the princes were in the tower. Did my mother spend any time with them?
I wasn't there at the end.
Before you left?
Speak, John! When I was told to leave the tower, I was promised that the boys would be cared for.
Who made this promise?
My Lady Margaret.
So she was here?
When I left, yes.
And is it true that only King Richard had access to the tower?
Well, the King and the Lord Constable.
Oh, really? Wasn't Lord Stanley the Lord Constable at that time?
I believe he was.
How interesting. And before you left, John, was Edward growing weaker?
If that will be all, my lord.
Yes. Thank you, John. That will be all. Why do people lie, Mother?
Many reasons. To protect a loved one.
Protect them from what? I've lived in fear for months. Ever since Argentine's prophecy. You will be in mortal danger all this year from divisions within your kingdom. It's not my people I need to fear. It's not even death. It's the curse that you have brought on me, on my reign, on everything that you have touched. Perhaps even on my children.
What do you think I might have done, Henry?
You were here and you said you weren't. Your husband had a key to the tower. You lied to me. I thought that I could trust you, of all people. I don't know what you were going through when I was growing up in exile, but one thing that is becoming clear to me is that more than you wanted to be with me as a child, more than you wanted peace for this country, you wanted to be the mother of the king, and you would stop at nothing.
Whatever you think of me, the people want peace.
How can lasting peace be built upon the murder of the rightful king? Even if you didn't murder the princes, you might as well have done. Because you were here. And you said you weren't. I've already lost my wife. And now it seems I've lost my mother.
So now Henry had to face the devastating implications of a fact he'd long known. His mother's husband had indeed been Constable of England all those years ago. So she had possessed the opportunity as well as the motive.
O clemens opia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. O clemens opia, o dulcis Virgo Maria.
Were the 7 hours a day she famously spent in religious devotion a desperate penitence for the murder of that young prince?
O dulcis Virgo Maria, O clemens opia, 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 O dulcis Virgo Maria.
Or was she begging forgiveness for the crimes she was yet to commit?
Opia, O dulcis Virgo Maria.
Although she was, strictly speaking, a prisoner, Lady Catherine Gordon was received with all the respect due to her as a member of the Scottish royal family, and also, perhaps, as the next Queen of England.
My lady, the Pretender's wife and son have arrived.
It seemed the crown was within the Pretender's grasp.
I'm sorry to wake you.
Lady Margaret.
I have to admire your achievement. I hadn't realized quite how clever you've been. Your strategy has worked brilliantly. You are believed all over Europe. You've unsettled this country in a time of peace. You've turned my son's wife against him. And the hardest part for me is that you've made my son hate me.
I didn't make your son hate you.
Your wife and son are here. You must be longing to see them and tell Catherine what is happening. Come. I will take you to them. Sleeping. My little grandsons. Princes in the tower.
course, you realize once you're king, you'll have to kill them.
Will I?
If you don't, they'll come back. Little princes grow up. That's what happens if you spare a king's son. He returns, as you have returned so convincingly. You could do it now. Everyone thinks you're locked up. You're the last person your sister would suspect. Have I no surprises for you? The poor, desperate Duchess. She's taught you well. She's turned you into the lost prince. You and the clever Duchess. You thought of everything. Almost.
I want to see my wife and son.
Who are you? You don't know, do you? Well, I can help you. Come with me. What are you afraid of?
Who are they?
Ask them.
Who are you?
Try again.
What is your name? How long have they been here?
What if I told you they've been here for 16 years? How old do you think they are?
Where did you get them?
Look at this. Cloth of gold. Only a king can wear cloth of gold, as you know. And they're rather small. Made for a coronation, perhaps? I'd better give it back. Shall we look for a birthmark? Do you think he'd mind?
Stop it! Leave him alone!
They love me. I'm their only visitor. They'd do anything for me. You are not Richard of York. And these creatures are the proof.
Proof? Proof that your son has no right to be king. And he knows it.
Henry doesn't know about them. I found them. And they are no threat to Henry. How could these creatures rule the country? One of them had his tongue cut out and then cauterized. His brother saw it and then swallowed his own tongue so the same wouldn't happen to him. I found them when I came here after Henry's coronation. They'd been like that for years.
You should have killed them.
To kill is a mortal sin. And besides, I thought they might be useful one day.
Vous êtes particulièrement faible. Comment une femme peut devenir un monstre? How can a woman become such a monster?
How dare you! I learned it from men. Henry's father raped me when I was 12 years old to secure my land. His birth ripped my 13-year-old body apart and left me barren. I've had 4 husbands and changed allegiances many times. Oh, I learned it from men, and from every Yorkist I ever knew, that to be soft is to be brutalized.
Take me to my family.
You are too dangerous. With you gone, Henry and his dynasty can survive, and this country can be at peace.
You want me to die?
No. I don't want you to die. Walk through that door, and I will bring those creatures out into the light.
You wouldn't.
My son hates me. I have nothing to lose.
You can't prove those wretches are the princes.
And you can't prove they're not.
What about my son?
If you go as a commoner, I can guarantee his safety.
As a commoner?
If you go as a prince, he will be hunted until the day he dies.
And my wife?
She and your son will be members of this household for the rest of their lives, and I shall say so to the ambassadors.
Damn you.
I have damned myself. But you can save your soul.
My name is Richard. First, let it be known that I was born in the town of Tournai in Flanders. And my father's name is called John Warbeck, which said John Warbeck was controller of the said town of Tournai. And my mother's name is Catherine de Faro, and my grandfather upon my mother's side was called Peter de Faro.
What did you do to him?
Nothing.
He refuses to see me.
Elizabeth.
My lord.
I should like to think that this matter may hurt you less one day. His wife is to become a member of our household. She's very lovely, isn't she?
Yes.
Does he really look like your brother?
Yes. He does.
What will he write about it, do you think?
He'll write what he's told to write. Or perhaps he'll throw it all on the fire once we've gone.
So history won't tell the true story that we've seen?
Do you think we've seen the true story, Combray? Anyway, history will say what someone decides it should say. Or what Mr. Moore remembers when he's older and, let's hope, braver.
The king has asked us to stay for a while.
It's not over then?
Apparently not.
Perkin Warbeck. It's not a real name, is it? If he isn't the prince, then who is he? And why did he do it?
Perhaps we'll never know.
Perhaps those who know will never say. Will you see him?
Bishop Combray, if you would please come. I would like someone to take a message to my son.
Of course.
Tell him, remember me. Remember me by my own name. Remember.
Will.
Remember also, there is a price for peace, and we must all pay.
Write that in your book, Mr. Moore.
What I've written here may never be read. Or if it is read, it may never be believed. That is the nature of history. And history is written by the victors. But this much the world knows. The Bishop of Cambrai took a copy of the confession home to the Duchess of Burgundy, who had to concede publicly that this, finally, was the extinction of the House of York. In private, she maintained until the day she died that Perkin Warbeck was her nephew Richard. Before he returned to Spain, Dr. de Puebla agreed a contract of marriage between Prince Arthur of England and the Infanta Catherine of Aragon. Queen Elizabeth herself did not live long after the death of the man who called himself her brother. She died in childbirth. The rest of Henry's reign was a time of fear and darkness. He was never loved by the people. After the death of the Queen, Lady Catherine Gordon kept company with the King for the rest of his life. Lady Margaret Beaufort's lifelong dream of a Tudor dynasty came true. But it was not Arthur who went on to be the next King of England. It was Henry, who, on his brother's death, inherited a wife and a kingdom. And as for me, I prosper in the court of King Henry VIII. But these events of so long ago still haunt me and trouble my conscience. Though I have lived long, I've never encountered anyone as vivid or as memorable as the man who was hanged as Perkin Warbeck. He was more like a prince than any monarch I've ever met.